You're a walking corpse, Maria. You should learn to be invisible before I put you in a home where they'll forget to feed you." Isabel Francesco's voice dripped with venom as she deliberately tilted the crystal wine glass, red liquid spilling across Maria Umberto's lap in a cruel, calculated stream. The elderly woman, 73 and still recovering from the stroke that had stolen her voice, flinched but couldn't move fast enough. Her trembling hands fumbled uselessly at the spreading stain. "No, stop!" The silver-polished cloth hit the marble floor with a soft thud as Silvia Robinson rushed forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. She dropped to her knees beside Maria, wrapping her arms around the fragile woman's shoulders. "Mrs. Umberto, it's okay. I've got you." Isabel's designer heel came down hard on Silvia's hand, grinding into her knuckles. Pain shot up her arm, but Silvia refused to let go. "Get your filthy hands off her, you pathetic little nobody," Isabel snarled, her perfectly manicured fingers now reaching for Maria's hair. "This useless old woman should be grateful I don't finish what that stroke started." Silvia's voice came out steady despite the throbbing in her hand. "You will not touch her again. Not while I'm here." Isabel's laugh was cold and sharp as breaking glass. She snatched the empty wine bottle from the sideboard and hurled it across the gold-leafed dining room. It exploded against the wall beside Silvia's head, crimson droplets raining down like blood. Silvia shielded Maria with her body, glass shards catching in her dark curls. "Mrs. Umberto," Silvia whispered urgently, her lips close to the older woman's ear. "Breathe with me. You're safe. I promise you're safe." A voice like winter itself cut through the chaos. "What the hell is happening in my house?" Giovanni Umberto filled the arched doorway, his 6'3" frame immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Silvia made in a year. His steel-gray eyes swept the room, his mother's wine-soaked dress, his fiancée's flushed face, and the black woman in a maid's uniform kneeling protectively between them. Isabel's expression transformed in an instant. Her eyes went wide, her lip trembled, and she stumbled backward, clutching her arm as though she'd been struck. "Giovanni, thank God. I tried to stop her, but she attacked me. She pushed your mother, and when I tried to help, she grabbed me." "That's a lie." Silvia's voice rang clear through the room as she looked up, her brown eyes meeting Giovanni's cold stare. "I was protecting her. Your fiancé poured wine on your mother and threatened to—" "Shut your mouth!" Isabel shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Silvia. "You think anyone's going to believe you over me? You're nothing. You're hired help. You're disposable." She turned back to Giovanni, her voice dropping to a wounded whisper. "She's been stealing from us, Giovanni. I've seen her going through your mother's jewelry. I was trying to confront her when she went crazy." Giovanni's jaw tightened. He took 3 measured steps into the room, his gaze fixed on Silvia, with the cold calculation of a man who'd built an empire on knowing when someone was lying. But this time he couldn't see past the performance. "Step away from my mother." Silvia's stomach dropped. "Sir, please listen. I said step away." Giovanni's voice cracked through the air like a gunshot, sharp enough to silence even the ticking of the antique clock. Isabel exhaled dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest. "Finally. She was scaring me, darling." Silvia gently eased Maria against the cushioned dining chair, her hands shaking as she smoothed the older woman's silver hair. "Mrs. Umberto needs medical attention. Please don't leave her alone." "You're fired." Giovanni's words landed with brutal finality. "Pack your things. You have 30 minutes to be off my property, or my men will escort you out." Silvia's breath caught. She had seen this before. The way power crushed truth, the way wealth could rewrite reality. She rose slowly, straightening her uniform with the quiet dignity her father had taught her. I was only trying to protect her. Isabel stepped closer, her voice low enough that only Silvia could hear. You should have known your place, sweetheart. People like you don't win against people like me. Silvia looked one last time at Maria's stricken face, tears streaming silently down the older woman's cheeks, one trembling hand reaching toward her. Then she met Giovanni's cold, unforgiving stare. Please, she said softly, her voice steady even as her world crumbled. Whatever you think of me, don't leave her alone with that woman. No one answered. Silvia turned and walked through the gold and marble foyer, where the broken wine bottle glittered like shattered rubies, past the crystal chandelier that had probably witnessed 100 betrayals just like this one, past the portrait of Giovanni's late father, whose eyes seemed to follow her with something like disappointment. Outside, the rain began, cold, relentless, indifferent. The drops hammered against her shoulders as she walked the long, curved driveway to where her battered Toyota Corolla waited under the oak trees. She gripped her bag tighter, refusing to look back at the mansion that had become both her sanctuary and her grave. Behind her, in the shadow of the Umberto estate, the only person who had truly loved Maria was disappearing into the storm, carrying the weight of a crime she never committed, and the knowledge that she'd failed the one person who needed her most. If you want to see Giovanni discover the devastating truth that destroys him, hit that like button right now. Share this story with someone who believes the truth always comes to light. And subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the Mafia boss finally realizes he threw away the only person who was truly loyal. The rain had followed Silvia all the way to the edge of the Umberto property, as if the sky itself was mourning what had just been stolen from her. She fumbled with her keys, her hands still shaking from adrenaline and rage, and the crushing weight of injustice. The Toyota's door handle was cold and slick under her palm, and for a moment she just stood there in the downpour, letting the water wash away the tears she refused to shed in front of them. 3 months. That's how long she'd cared for Maria Umberto. 3 months of learning the older woman's silent language, the way her left eye twitched when she was frightened, the soft hum she made when she was content, the desperate squeeze of her hand when she needed help but couldn't ask for it. 3 months of reading to her from old Italian novels, of brushing her silver hair with the gentle patience Maria's own son couldn't seem to spare, of holding her through the trembling panic attacks that came in the dead of night when the memories of the stroke returned. 3 months, and it all ended because a socialite in Louboutin decided an old woman wasn't worth the air she breathed. Silvia yanked the car door open and slid into the driver's seat, her uniform soaked through, her bag dumped unceremoniously on the passenger side. The interior smelled like the lavender air freshener her little sister had given her for Christmas. Back when things were simpler, back when she thought this job might actually save them. The engine turned over once, twice. Nothing. Come on, Silvia whispered, her voice cracking. Please, not now. She tried again, pumping the gas pedal the way her father had taught her years ago, back when he was still alive and the world made sense. The engine sputtered, coughed, and finally caught with a reluctant growl. The dashboard lights flickered to life, illuminating her face in sickly yellow. She should leave. She should put this cursed place in her rear-view mirror and never look back. But Maria's face haunted her, those wide, terrified eyes, the way her trembling hand had reached out as Silvia walked away. And worse, the secret Maria had managed to whisper 3 nights ago, when Isabel had gone to some charity gala, and the house was finally, blessedly quiet. Silvia had been helping Maria into bed, adjusting the pillows the way she liked them, when the older woman had grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Her mouth had worked soundlessly for a moment, the way it always did when she was trying desperately to form words that her damaged brain could no longer fully command. Pill, Maria had finally managed. The single syllable coming out slurred and wet. Her eyes had darted to the nightstand, where an orange prescription bottle sat beside a glass of water. Be bad, Isabel, hurt. Silvia's blood had run cold. She'd picked up the bottle, reading the label. Diazepam, for anxiety. Take 1 tablet as needed. Mrs. Umberto, is Isabel giving you too many of these? Silvia had asked gently, kneeling beside the bed. Maria's nod had been almost imperceptible, but the fear in her eyes had been unmistakable. She'd touched her chest, then her head, then made a sleeping gesture. Her shorthand for the way the medication made her feel. Too foggy, too disconnected, too vulnerable. Silvia had documented everything that night. She'd taken photos of the pill bottle, noting that the prescription was supposed to last 60 days but was nearly empty after 3 weeks. She'd written down every instance she'd witnessed of Isabel helping Maria with her medication, always when Giovanni was away, always with that saccharine smile that never reached her eyes. Now, sitting in her dying car with rain hammering the windshield, Silvia reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. The photos were still there. The notes were still there. Evidence that Isabel Francesco was systematically drugging an elderly stroke victim, probably to keep her compliant, possibly to speed up her deterioration. But who would believe her now? She was the fired maid, the woman accused of theft and assault. Giovanni Umberto had looked at her like she was garbage, like she was exactly what Isabel had called her, disposable. The phone's screen blurred as fresh tears finally came. Silvia let them fall, let herself break apart in the privacy of her car where no one could see, where no one could tell her to be strong or dignified or grateful for the scraps they'd thrown her way. She'd failed. She'd failed Maria. And now that beautiful, fragile woman would be left alone with a monster in designer clothing. A knock on the window made Silvia jump, her heart leaping into her throat. She turned to see Marco, Giovanni's head of security, a mountain of a man with kind eyes that seemed wildly out of place in his line of work. He was holding an umbrella, rain cascading off its edges. Silvia rolled down the window halfway, just enough to hear him. Miss Robinson, Marco said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Mr. Umberto wanted me to make sure you got off the property safely. Translation, make sure she actually left. I'm going, Silvia said, her voice hollow. Tell your boss he doesn't have to worry. The help knows when she's not wanted. Marco's jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something, but whatever it was, he swallowed it down. The gate code has been changed. You won't be able to come back. I wouldn't want to, Silvia lied. But as she said it, her eyes drifted past Marco to the illuminated windows of the mansion. She could see shadows moving behind the curtains of the second floor. Maria's room. Was she alone now? Was Isabel already up there, hovering like a vulture, holding out another little white pill and a glass of water? Marco, Silvia said suddenly, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles went white. Please, check on Mrs. Umberto tonight. Make sure she's okay. Make sure... I can't get involved in family business, Miss Robinson. I'm sorry. She's in danger, Silvia pressed, her voice rising with desperation. Isabel is giving her too much medication. I have proof. I have... Mr. Umberto made his decision. Marco's tone had shifted, becoming formal, distant, the voice of a man following orders even when his conscience screamed otherwise. I suggest you leave before this becomes more difficult. The window rolled up before Silvia could respond, the mechanism grinding in protest. She watched Marco walk back toward the mansion, his umbrella disappearing into the golden glow of the estate's entrance lights. She was truly alone now. Silvia shifted the car into drive, the transmission protesting with a metallic whine that sounded too much like her own internal scream. The tires spun for a moment on the wet pavement before finding purchase. And then she was moving, slowly at first, then faster, the mansion shrinking in her rear-view mirror until it was just another set of lights in the darkness. The road out of the Umberto estate wound through perfectly manicured grounds, rose gardens that probably cost more to maintain than Silvia's annual salary, marble fountains that ran even in winter, oak trees older than the city itself, standing sentinel along the drive. It was beautiful in the way mausoleums were beautiful, pristine, untouchable, and utterly cold. As she reached the main gate, Silvia glanced one last time in the mirror. The mansion sat on its hill like a crown, glowing against the storm-dark sky. Somewhere in that palace of marble and lies, Maria Umberto was probably sitting in her chair, staring at nothing, wondering why the only person who'd shown her genuine kindness had abandoned her. "I'm sorry," Silvia whispered to the reflection. "I'm so sorry." The gate opened automatically as she approached, Marco having already cleared her departure from his security booth. It closed behind her with a decisive clang, the iron bars sliding together like the bars of a cage. Only she was the one being locked out. The road beyond the estate was darker, older, the pavement cracked and uneven, in a way that reminded Silvia she was heading back to reality, back to the south side, where rents were 3 months overdue and her little sister Destiny was probably waiting up, worried sick because Silvia hadn't called. Back to a world where people like her didn't win against people like Isabel Francesco. The heating in the Toyota barely worked, blowing lukewarm air that did nothing against the cold seeping into her bones. Silvia turned up the radio to fill the silence, but it was just static and a late-night talk show host discussing the upcoming Francesco Umberto engagement gala. The event of the season, apparently. 500 guests. A political alliance that would reshape the city's power structure. And at the center of it all, a monster in a white dress, smiling for cameras while she tortured an old woman behind closed doors. Silvia's hands tightened on the wheel. The photos on her phone felt like they were burning through her bag, evidence that could destroy Isabel if anyone would just listen. But who? The police? Half of them were probably on Giovanni Umberto's payroll. The media. They'd laugh at a maid trying to take down high society. She was nobody. Isabel had been right about that much. But as Silvia drove through the rain-soaked streets, past the boundaries between the world of the wealthy and the world of the forgotten, a dangerous thought took root in her mind. Maybe being nobody meant she had nothing left to lose, and people with nothing to lose were capable of anything. The city lights blurred through her tears as Silvia Robinson disappeared into the night, carrying with her the truth that powerful men refused to see, the evidence that could shatter an empire, and the unshakable certainty that she would find a way back to Maria Umberto, even if it killed her. Behind her, lightning split the sky over the Umberto mansion, illuminating it in stark white relief for just a moment before darkness claimed it again. The storm was only beginning. The apartment building on Archer Street had seen better days, probably sometime in the 1970s, before the paint started peeling like sunburned skin and the front door lock broke for the 3rd time that year. Silvia climbed the 4 flights of stairs because the elevator had been under maintenance since August, her wet shoes squeaking against linoleum that had once been white, but now existed in some indefinable shade between gray and beige. She could hear Destiny's music through the door before she even reached it. Some pop song about heartbreak and redemption, that her 17-year-old sister played on repeat when she was worried. Silvia paused with her key in the lock, closing her eyes and taking a breath she didn't really have. She needed to be strong now. Destiny couldn't see her broken. The door swung open before Silvia could turn the key. Oh, thank God. Destiny stood in the doorway, her natural hair pulled back in a silk scarf, wearing the oversized university sweatshirt Silvia had bought her last Christmas, back when Silvia still believed the Umberto job would be their ticket out of this place. I've been calling you for 2 hours. What happened? Did they... Her eyes traveled over Silvia's soaked uniform, her disheveled hair, the way her shoulders sagged like someone had cut her strings. Oh, no. Sil, no. I'm fine, Silvia lied, pushing past her sister into the cramped space they called home. The apartment was exactly 640 square feet. She knew because the landlord had bragged about it being spacious for the south side. The kitchen bled into the living room, which was really just a couch and a TV stand away from being Destiny's bedroom. Silvia's room was barely large enough for a twin bed and a dresser, but at least it had a door. You're not fine. You're shaking. Destiny followed her like a shadow, hovering with the nervous energy of someone who'd spent too much of her childhood waiting for bad news. Tell me what happened. Did Isabel do something? Silvia dropped her bag on the kitchen counter, next to the stack of overdue bills she'd been strategically ignoring. The electric company wanted $340. The landlord wanted $1,850 for the 3 months back rent. Destiny's college application fees were due next week. Another $200 they didn't have. And now Silvia didn't have a job. She hurt Mrs. Umberto, Silvia said quietly, staring at the bills without really seeing them. I tried to stop her. Giovanni fired me. What? Destiny's voice cracked with outrage. You were protecting his mother, and he... That's insane. That's... Sil, you have to fight this. You have to... Fight it with what, Dee? Silvia turned, and her sister flinched at whatever she saw in her face. With what money? What lawyer? I'm a maid who got accused of assault and theft by a woman whose shoes cost more than our rent. Who's going to believe me? The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush them both. Destiny's eyes were bright with tears she was too stubborn to shed. So that's it? We just... What? Pretend the last 3 months didn't happen? We survive, Silvia said, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. Like we always do. She moved past Destiny toward her bedroom, needing space, needing to fall apart in private. But her sister's voice stopped her at the threshold. Dad wouldn't have let this go. Silvia's hand froze on the doorframe. Dad's dead, Destiny. He's been dead for 8 years. Because he saved Giovanni's father, Destiny pressed, her voice shaking with an anger Silvia recognized because she felt it too, that rage at the unfairness of everything. He took a bullet meant for Victor Umberto. And what did we get? A funeral wreath and a thank you card, no pension, no help, nothing. That's not why he did it, Silvia said softly, her eyes stinging. Dad didn't save Victor Umberto for a reward. He did it because that's who he was. Yeah, and look where it got him. Look where it got us. Silvia closed her eyes. She could still remember her father's funeral. The way Giovanni, barely 23 at the time, had stood at the graveside in his expensive black suit, his face carved from stone. He'd offered his condolences in that quiet, controlled voice. He'd called Marcus Robinson a man of honor. He'd said the Umberto family owed them a debt, but debt apparently had an expiration date. Get some sleep, Dee, Silvia said, too tired to argue. We'll figure it out in the morning. She slipped into her room and closed the door, leaning against it until she heard Destiny's reluctant footsteps retreating. Only then did she let herself slide down to the floor, her wet uniform leaving a dark streak on the door. The room was exactly as she'd left it that morning, a lifetime ago, when she'd still had purpose, when she'd still believed she could make a difference. The twin bed with its threadbare comforter, the dresser with the stuck bottom drawer, the single window that looked out onto the brick wall of the building next door, and on the dresser, catching the dim light from the street lamp outside, was the brooch. Silvia pulled herself up and crossed to it, her fingers trembling as she lifted the delicate piece. It was vintage, probably from the 1950s. White gold filigree work surrounding a small cluster of seed pearls with a tiny sapphire at the center. Maria had given it to her 2 weeks ago, pressing it into Silvia's palm after a particularly good day when Maria had managed to feed herself for the first time since the stroke. For you, Maria had whispered, her words slurred but determined. Kay, keep safe. Silvia had tried to refuse. It was clearly a family heirloom, worth more than anything Silvia had ever owned. But Maria had been insistent, closing Silvia's fingers around it with surprising strength. Now, standing in her cramped bedroom with her life falling apart, Silvia understood. Maria had known. Somehow she'd known that Isabel's cruelty would escalate, that the house would become dangerous, that Silvia might need to leave. The brooch was a talisman, a promise, a plea. Don't forget me. I won't, Silvia whispered to the empty room. I won't forget you, Mrs. Umberto. She pinned the brooch to her uniform right over her heart and finally let herself cry. 20 miles across the city, in a mansion that had never known hunger or desperation, Giovanni Umberto stood at the window of his study and felt nothing. That should have bothered him. The fact that he'd just fired someone possibly ruined her life, and felt nothing but the cold calculation of necessary business. That should have meant something. But Giovanni had been trained since birth to bury sentiment beneath strategy. Emotions were weaknesses. Attachments were vulnerabilities. His father had taught him that, had beaten it into him with words and occasionally with fists when the lesson didn't take. So he stood at the window, whiskey in hand, and told himself he'd made the right choice. Isabel was his future. The Francesco alliance would bring their shipping contracts, their political connections, their influence in the state senate. It was a merger, clean and profitable. Personal feelings didn't enter into it. Except Giovanni's grip tightened on the glass. Except his mother's face kept surfacing in his mind, the terror in her eyes when he'd walked into that dining room. The way she'd reached for the maid, for Silvia, as if the younger woman was a lifeline and Giovanni himself was the threat. He'd told himself it was confusion. His mother's stroke had damaged her cognition. She didn't understand what was happening. But there had been clarity in that moment, a desperate lucidity that Giovanni couldn't quite rationalize away. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Giovanni said without turning. The door opened, and he caught Isabel's reflection in the window. A vision in cream silk loungewear, her hair perfectly tousled in that way that probably took an hour to achieve. She crossed to him, her movements liquid and practiced, and slipped her arms around his waist from behind. "You're brooding," she murmured against his shoulder. "Don't. You made the right decision." "Did I?" The words came out before Giovanni could stop them. Isabel stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" Giovanni turned to face her, studying the woman he was supposed to marry in 3 months. She was beautiful, objectively, undeniably beautiful. Classic features, perfect skin, a smile that had graced magazine covers. But when he looked at her, he felt nothing. No warmth, no connection, just the cold arithmetic of power and advantage. "My mother looked afraid of you," Giovanni said carefully. Isabel's laugh was practiced, musical. "Darling, your mother is afraid of everything since the stroke. The physical therapist terrifies her. The gardener terrifies her. I'm sure the mailman terrifies her. You can't take it personally. She stopped going to physical therapy. Because she's being stubborn," Isabel said smoothly, her hands moving to his chest. "You know how the elderly can be. They give up. It's sad, but it's not my fault." Giovanni caught her wrists, holding them still. "And the maid? Silvia? Was she telling the truth?" Something flickered in Isabel's eyes. So fast, Giovanni almost missed it. "Are you seriously questioning me right now? After that woman assaulted me in your home?" "I didn't see any marks." "Because I have good skin care," Isabel snapped, pulling her hands free. Then, catching herself, she softened her tone. "Giovanni, I know you're under stress. The merger, the expansion into the docklands, the senator's investigation. It's a lot. But you can't let some opportunistic maid manipulate you. That's what people like her do. They see weakness and they exploit it. People like her." The phrase landed wrong in Giovanni's chest. "Get some rest," Giovanni said, stepping back. "I have work to do." Isabel's smile tightened. "Of course. I'll see you at breakfast." She left with the kind of grace that came from years of finishing school, closing the door with barely a sound. Giovanni waited until her footsteps faded before returning to the window. The grounds were dark except for the security lights marking the perimeter. Somewhere out there, beyond the gates and the manicured gardens and the world he controlled, Silvia Robinson was probably in some tiny apartment, probably scared, probably wondering how she'd survive. And his mother was upstairs, alone, in a house that had begun to feel like a mausoleum. Giovanni drained his whiskey and poured another, trying to drown the doubt that had started eating at his certainty. He'd made the right choice. He had to have made the right choice. Because if he hadn't, if he'd thrown away an innocent woman to protect a lie, then he was becoming exactly the kind of man his father had been. And that was a truth Giovanni wasn't ready to face. Giovanni woke to the sound of Isabel's voice carrying through the hallway, bright, performative, laced with that particular edge that meant she was talking to the staff. He glanced at the clock. 6:47 a.m., too early for Isabel to be awake unless she wanted something. He found her in the west hallway outside what used to be Silvia's quarters, a small room near the service stairs that the live-in staff used. Isabel was speaking to Marco, Giovanni's head of security, her hand pressed dramatically to her chest. "I just wanted to make sure the room was cleared properly," Isabel was saying, her voice trembling with false concern. "After what happened yesterday, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what else that woman might have taken." Giovanni's jaw tightened as he approached. "What's going on?" Isabel turned, her eyes widening with perfectly calibrated surprise. "Oh, darling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. I just—" She gestured helplessly at Marco, who stood with his massive frame blocking the doorway to Silvia's old room, his expression carefully neutral. "I asked Marco to check the room, just to be thorough, and we found something, boss." Marco's voice was flat, professional, but Giovanni caught the flicker of discomfort in the man's eyes. He held up an evidence bag, and inside, catching the morning light, was a ring, white gold with an emerald the size of a thumbnail surrounded by diamonds. Giovanni's blood went cold. He knew that ring. It had been his grandmother's, passed down to his mother, worth close to $200,000. It had been missing for 6 weeks. It was in the back of her closet, Marco continued, still not meeting Giovanni's eyes, behind a loose panel in the baseboard. Hidden. "Oh my God," Isabel breathed, one hand flying to her mouth. "I knew something was wrong. I told you, Giovanni. I told you she was." "Where exactly did you find it?" Giovanni interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Marco shifted his weight. "Miss Francesco asked me to do a sweep of the room at 6:30 this morning. Said she had a feeling. I found it within 10 minutes. 10 minutes. In a room that had supposedly been thoroughly searched when his mother's ring first went missing. A room where Silvia had lived for 3 months without anyone suspecting her of theft until yesterday." Giovanni took the evidence bag from Marco, studying the ring through the plastic. There wasn't a speck of dust on it, no tarnish, no signs of being hidden in a wall for 6 weeks. It looked like it had been polished yesterday. "Did you touch it?" Giovanni asked Marco. "No, sir. Used gloves. Proper procedure." "Who else has been in this room since Miss Robinson left?" Marco's jaw worked for a moment before he answered. "Cleaning staff came through last night around 9 p.m. Before that, just Miss Francesco, sir. She wanted to make sure nothing was left behind." Giovanni's eyes cut to Isabel, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable before recovering with a bright smile. "I was just being thorough, darling. Making sure she didn't leave anything that could embarrass you." "At 6:30 in the morning. I'm an early riser. You know that." Isabel stepped closer, her hand landing on his arm with practiced intimacy. "Giovanni, I know this is hard. You trusted her. But sometimes people aren't who we think they are. That woman fooled all of us." Something in Giovanni's chest twisted. The way Isabel said, "that woman," with the same dismissive contempt she used for the gardeners, the drivers, anyone she considered beneath her notice. It reminded him uncomfortably of his father. Victor Umberto had spoken the same way about the people who worked for him, the people who bled for him, the people like Marcus Robinson who'd taken a bullet meant for him. "Marco, seal this room," Giovanni said quietly. "No one goes in or out without my permission. Not staff, not family, no one." Isabel's smile faltered. "Surely that's not necessary." "It's necessary." Giovanni handed the evidence bag back to Marco. "And Marco, I want the security footage from this hallway. Last 24 hours. The cameras in the service wing have been down for maintenance since Monday," Marco said. And Giovanni didn't miss the way the man's eyes flickered toward Isabel for just a fraction of a second. Tech was supposed to fix them yesterday, but with everything that happened, how convenient. Giovanni's voice was soft, dangerous. "Get them working again. Today." "Yes, sir." As Marco left, Isabel's fingers tightened on Giovanni's arm. "You can't possibly think I had anything to do with Giovanni. That's insulting. I'm trying to help you. That woman stole from your family, and you're treating me like I'm the criminal." Giovanni looked down at her, at the perfectly applied makeup at 6:47 in the morning, at the designer loungewear that cost more than most people's monthly salary, at the diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. Everything about Isabel Francesco was a performance, a carefully constructed facade. And for the first time, Giovanni wondered what she was hiding underneath. "I need to check on my mother," he said, pulling his arm free. "I'll come with you." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "I need to speak with her alone." Isabel's expression shuddered. "Of course. I'll be in the breakfast room when you're ready to discuss this rationally." She swept away, her silk robe trailing behind her like a queen's train, and Giovanni was left standing in the hallway that suddenly felt too cold, too empty, too full of lies he couldn't quite name. Maria's room was on the second floor, overlooking the rose gardens his mother had planted 30 years ago when she'd first become mistress of this house. Giovanni knocked softly before entering, a habit his mother had insisted upon even after the stroke. I may not speak well, but I still deserve my dignity. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the morning light. Maria sat in her wheelchair by the window, her silver hair unbrushed, her hands folded in her lap in that particular way that meant she'd been crying. "Mama." Giovanni crossed to her, kneeling so he could see her face. "Are you all right?" Maria's eyes were red-rimmed, wet with fresh tears. She looked at him with such profound sadness that Giovanni felt something crack in his chest. "What's wrong? Are you in pain? Should I call Dr. Reeves?" Maria shook her head frantically, her left hand, the one she could still control, reaching up to touch her chest. Not her heart, higher, the hollow of her throat where she always wore. Giovanni's breath caught. "Your brooch, the one Papa gave you. Where is it?" Maria's face crumpled. She touched her chest again, then pointed toward the door, her hand shaking with the effort of communication. Then she made a gesture Giovanni had seen her use before when referring to Silvia, a gentle patting motion, like soothing a child. "Silvia has your brooch," Giovanni said slowly, understanding dawning. "You gave it to her." Maria nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks now. She grabbed at Giovanni's hand with surprising strength and pulled it to her chest, over her heart, then pushed it away, the closest she could come to saying, "I gave it willingly, with love." "Mama, why?" But Maria was pointing again, more urgently now, toward the nightstand where her medications sat in neat rows. She made a pushing motion, then covered her face with her hands, her shorthand for hiding, secret, fear. Giovanni's blood ran cold. "Is someone giving you the wrong medication?" Maria looked toward the door, then back at him, her eyes wide with terror. She mouthed a word, struggling with the syllables, her face contorting with the effort. I. Take your time, Mama. It's okay. Isabel." The name came out mangled, wet, barely recognizable, but it was unmistakable. Giovanni sat back on his heels, his world tilting on its axis. "Isabel is doing something with your medication." Maria nodded frantically, then made a sleeping gesture, then pointed to her head and made a confused, dizzy motion. Too much. Isabel was giving her too much, making her foggy, making her vulnerable. "Why didn't you tell me?" Giovanni asked, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew why. Because every time he'd visited his mother in the past 3 months, Isabel had been there, hovering, controlling the conversation, dismissing Maria's attempts to communicate as confusion or exhaustion. Because Giovanni had been too busy with his merger, his expansion, his empire to notice his own mother was being systematically silenced in her own home. Because he'd chosen to believe the beautiful lie instead of the ugly truth. Maria touched his face with her trembling hand, and Giovanni saw forgiveness there he didn't deserve. "I'll fix this," he promised, his voice rough. "Mama, I swear to you, I'll fix this." Giovanni found Marco in the security office, reviewing footage from the mansion's exterior cameras. "I need you to do something for me," Giovanni said without preamble. Quietly. Marco turned, his expression carefully neutral. "Sir?" "Run a financial background check on the Francesco family. Full audit. I want to know everything. Assets, debts, offshore accounts, everything." Marco's eyebrows rose fractionally. That will take some explaining, sir. They're your future in-laws. Which is exactly why I need to know." Giovanni leaned against the desk, his voice dropping. "How long have you worked for my family, Marco?" 15 years, sir. 15 years. And in that time, have I ever asked you to do something that didn't serve this family's interests? No, sir. Then trust me now. Giovanni met Marco's eyes. Something isn't right. I need to know what I'm walking into before that wedding. Marco was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. I'll have something for you by tonight. One more thing. Giovanni's jaw tightened. That ring Isabel found this morning. I want to know who's been in that room, when, and how that ring got there. I don't care if you have to interview every person in this house. I want the truth. And if the truth isn't what Miss Francesco says it is? Giovanni thought of his mother's tears, of Silvia's quiet dignity as she'd walked away in the rain, of the cold calculation in Isabel's eyes that morning. Then we'll deal with it, Giovanni said, one way or another. By 8 p.m., Marco had his answer. Giovanni sat in his study, staring at the financial report Marco had placed on his desk with the kind of reverence usually reserved for bombs. The Francesco family was drowning, shipping contracts lost to competitors, investments that had turned toxic, real estate leveraged to the hilt and now underwater, debts to parties that didn't accept late payments or excuses. The Francesco fortune was a shell game, and Isabel was the final piece they were betting on to save themselves. There's more, Marco said quietly. The ring. It didn't have Silvia Robinson's fingerprints on it. It had 2 sets. Yours, from when you handled it this morning, and one other that matches prints we have on file for Eduardo Santos. Who the hell is Eduardo Santos? Night security guard. Francesco family recommended him for the position 3 months ago. Marco's expression was grim. He resigned this morning, didn't even collect his final paycheck. Just disappeared. Giovanni's hands curled into fists on the desk. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Isabel orchestrating Silvia's firing, planting evidence, eliminating the one person who stood between her and complete control of his vulnerable mother. This wasn't a marriage. It was a hostile takeover, and his mother was the first casualty. Find Silvia Robinson, Giovanni said, his voice like steel. I don't care what it takes. Find her and bring her back. Marco nodded. And Miss Francesco? Giovanni thought of his mother's terrified face, of the pills lined up on the nightstand, of Silvia walking away in the rain while he stood by and let it happen. Let her think she's won, Giovanni said softly. For now, because there was nothing more dangerous than a man who'd finally learned to see past the beautiful lie to the ugly truth beneath. And Giovanni Umberto was done being blind. Finding Silvia Robinson proved more difficult than Giovanni anticipated. The address on her employment file led to an apartment building on Archer Street, where a suspicious landlord claimed she'd moved out 2 weeks ago. A lie, Giovanni suspected, designed to protect a tenant from trouble. The phone number she'd listed went straight to a disconnected message. It was as if she'd vanished into the fabric of the city, swallowed by the kind of poverty that made people invisible to men like him. But Giovanni had other problems demanding his attention. Isabel had been hovering since the ring discovery, her presence a constant pressure at the edges of his awareness. She wanted reassurance, validation, gratitude for exposing Silvia's theft. She wanted him to press charges, to make an example, to ensure that woman never worked in this city again. Giovanni gave her none of those things. Instead, he gave her distance, claiming business emergencies and late meetings. He watched her the way he'd learned to watch his enemies, carefully looking for the tells, the cracks in the performance. What he saw terrified him. The way Isabel spoke to the staff when she thought he wasn't listening. Sharp, cutting, cruel. The way she helped his mother with medication, pills pressed into Maria's trembling hands, with a smile that never reached her eyes. The way she'd started making suggestions about his mother's care. Perhaps a facility would be better, somewhere with round-the-clock medical supervision, somewhere quiet where Maria could rest properly, somewhere Isabel could visit once a month with flowers and crocodile tears. 3 days after Silvia's firing, Giovanni sat in his study at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, staring at the financial reports Marco had compiled. The Francesco family wasn't just in debt, they were in free fall, circling the drain of bankruptcy with the kind of desperation that made people dangerous. The marriage wasn't a union, it was a life raft, and they were willing to sink anyone who got in their way, including, apparently, his mother. His eyes drifted to the second folder Marco had left, the one containing information about Marcus Robinson, Silvia's father. Giovanni had been 23 when it happened, still learning the business under his father's brutal tutelage. He remembered Marcus, quiet, competent, loyal to a fault, the kind of man Victor Umberto had used without ever truly valuing. The incident report was clinical in its details. Victor had been meeting with a rival family's representative at a neutral location, a restaurant in the warehouse district. The meeting had gone wrong. Shots were fired. Marcus Robinson had thrown himself in front of Victor Umberto and taken 3 bullets to the chest. Victor had survived. Marcus had bled out before the ambulance arrived. The report noted that Marcus left behind 2 daughters, Silvia, 19, and Destiny, 9. Victor had sent flowers to the funeral. A generous flower arrangement, the report specified, as if that mattered, as if flowers could replace a father, could pay rent, could give 2 orphaned girls anything resembling security. Giovanni closed the folder, his jaw tight. His father had owed Marcus Robinson's family a blood debt, the kind of debt that should have meant protection, support, a future. Instead, they'd gotten a fucking wreath. And now Giovanni had thrown Marcus's daughter out of his house based on the lies of a woman who was systematically torturing his mother. The weight of it settled on his chest like stones. He'd become his father after all. Giovanni found the brooch the next morning. He'd gone to his mother's room to check on her, a ritual he'd been performing multiple times a day since his eyes had opened to Isabel's cruelty. Maria was sleeping, her breathing soft and steady, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in months. The morning light caught something on her dresser, a small velvet jewelry box Giovanni had never noticed before. Inside was a photograph. His parents on their wedding day, young and radiant, his mother's neck adorned with a delicate brooch, white gold filigree, seed pearls, a sapphire at the center. The same brooch Maria had given to Silvia, but there was something odd about it in the photograph, something that nagged at Giovanni's memory. His father had been paranoid about security, especially after several kidnapping attempts in the 80s. He'd installed cameras, hired extra guards, and Giovanni's breath caught. And he'd commissioned special jewelry from a security firm, pieces that looked vintage but contained cutting-edge technology for the time, recording devices, trackers. His father had given his mother several such pieces, claiming they were family heirlooms, never telling her what they really were. Giovanni had thought all those pieces were in the vault. But if Maria had been wearing this brooch for the past 3 months, if Silvia had it now... He pulled out his phone and called Marco. "I need you to find Vincent Calabresi," Giovanni said without preamble. "He used to do security tech for my father in the 90s. Tell him I'll pay whatever he wants, but I need him at the house within the hour." "Boss, it's 7 a.m. "Within the hour, Marco." Vincent Calabrese was 73 years old, mostly retired and still sharp as a blade. He arrived at the mansion at 8:15 a.m. carrying a leather case that looked older than Giovanni. Isabel was at her morning Pilates class, something Giovanni had very carefully ensured by mentioning the instructor she liked had an opening. "Mr. Umberto," Vincent said, shaking Giovanni's hand with a grip that was still firm. "It's been a long time. I was sorry to hear about your father. Thank you for coming on short notice." Giovanni led him to his private study, where Marco stood guard at the door. "I need your expertise on something my father commissioned from you. A brooch, white gold filigree, seed pearls, sapphire center." Vincent's weathered face split into a grin. "The legacy piece. Yeah, I remember that one. Your father wanted something his wife would actually wear, something that wouldn't look out of place. Beautiful work, if I say so myself. What exactly is it?" "State of the art for 1994, Vincent said, settling into a chair. "Microtransmitter with a high-fidelity recorder. Range of about 50 meters. It was designed to broadcast to a secure receiver, probably in your father's study, and store recordings on a local encrypted drive. Battery life was good, too. If your mother wore it regularly, the motion would keep it charged. Those things could run for decades if maintained properly." Giovanni's heart began to hammer against his ribs. "And if someone has been wearing it recently, would it still record? If the receiver is still active and the drive hasn't been wiped?" "Absolutely. It would capture everything within about 15 feet, crystal clear audio." Vincent's eyes sharpened. "Why? What's this about?" "I need to access those recordings. Can you do that?" "If the receiver is still in the house and I can find the drive, sure. Where did your father usually keep his security equipment?" "His study, 3rd floor." 20 minutes later, Vincent was elbow-deep in the wall panel behind Victor Umberto's desk, a room Giovanni had left virtually untouched since his father's death 5 years ago. The old man worked with the confidence of someone who'd built the system himself, his gnarled fingers tracing wires and pulling out components that Giovanni couldn't begin to identify. "Here we go," Vincent said finally, extracting what looked like an external hard drive from the 1990s. "Your father didn't believe in cloud storage. Smart man. This is a local backup system, completely isolated. If the brooch was active in the past 3 months, it's all here." Giovanni's hands were steady as he took the drive, but inside, his heart was racing. "Can you pull the files? Give me your laptop." They moved to Giovanni's study. Vincent worked in silence, connecting the ancient drive through a series of adapters, bypassing encryption that had probably been cutting edge 30 years ago but was child's play to someone who'd designed it. The laptop screen filled with folders, hundreds of them, organized by date. "Last active files are from..." Vincent scrolled, then stopped. 3 days ago. Want me to play them?" Giovanni nodded, not trusting his voice. Vincent pulled up the most recent file and hit play. At first there was just ambient sound. Footsteps, the clink of dishes, the distant hum of the house's ventilation system. Then, clear as if she were standing in the room, Isabel's voice. "You're pathetic, you know that? Sitting there in your chair, drooling like an infant. Giovanni's mother, the great Maria Umberto, reduced to this." Giovanni's blood turned to ice. "He doesn't even see you anymore," Isabel continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "You're just furniture to him, a burden. It would be kinder if you just died in your sleep." "Maybe I should help with that. Extra pill or two. Who would know? Who would even care? A sound, then. Something being spilled, liquid hitting fabric. Maria's frightened whimper. "Oh, did I spill wine on you? How clumsy. Maybe you should lick it up. Show me you can still do something useful." Giovanni's hands curled into fists, his fingernails biting into his palms. Then, footsteps running, a cloth hitting the floor, and Silvia's voice, steady and clear and furious. "Get away from her, right now." "Excuse me." Isabel's voice had gone sharp, dangerous. "You heard me. Step away from Mrs. Umberto. You don't give me orders. I don't care what you think of me, but you will not treat her like this. Not while I'm here. Not ever." The sound of a struggle. Something breaking. Maria's soft crying. And Silvia's voice again. Gentle now. Soothing. "Mrs. Umberto, it's okay. I've got you. You're safe. I promise you're safe." Then Giovanni's own voice, cold and authoritative. "What the hell is happening in my house?" And everything that followed. Isabel's performance, Silvia's attempts to explain, his own brutal dismissal. Giovanni listened to himself fire the only person who'd shown his mother genuine love, listened to himself threaten her, listened to himself choose the lie over the truth. The recording ended. The study was silent except for the sound of Giovanni's harsh breathing. "You okay, Mr. Umberto?" Vincent asked carefully. Giovanni wasn't okay. He was burning from the inside out, rage and shame and self-loathing warring in his chest. He'd thrown Silvia out like garbage. He'd left his mother in the hands of a woman who threatened to kill her. He'd done exactly what his father would have done, protected power and appearances over truth and loyalty. "There are more files," Vincent said quietly. "Weeks' worth. You want me, too." "Copy all of them," Giovanni said, his voice like gravel. "Everything from the past 3 months, and put it on a secure drive." "And the woman on the recording? The one who protected your mother?" Giovanni stood, his steel-gray eyes as cold and hard as winter. "Her name is Silvia Robinson, and I'm going to find her, even if I have to tear this city apart to do it." He walked to the window, looking out over the grounds where Silvia had walked away in the rain 4 days ago. 4 days of his mother suffering. 4 days of Isabel's cruelty going unchecked. 4 days of his own blindness. "Marco," Giovanni said without turning, "I want Silvia Robinson found by tonight. I don't care what resources you need. I don't care if you have to knock on every door in the South Side. Find her and bring her back." "And Miss Francesco?" Marco asked. Giovanni thought of Isabel's voice on the recording, casual and cruel, threatening to murder his mother in her sleep. He thought of the engagement gala scheduled for next week, 500 guests, the Francesco-Umberto alliance about to be announced to the world. He thought of Silvia's quiet dignity, her courage, her loyalty to a woman who couldn't even speak her gratitude. "Let her prepare for her party," Giovanni said softly, and his smile was a terrible thing. "Let her think she's won, because I'm going to destroy her in front of everyone she knows, and I want her to feel exactly what my mother felt." Exactly what Silvia felt. He turned from the window, his expression carved from stone. "I want her to know what it means to be powerless." Vincent Calabresi packed up his equipment in silence, but as he left he paused at the door. "Your father was a hard man, Mr. Umberto, but he protected his own. Don't take too long to fix this. That girl on the recording, Silvia, she sounded like someone worth keeping." After Vincent left, Giovanni sat alone in his study, listening to the recordings again, and again, and again. Each time Silvia's voice cut through the darkness. "You will not treat her like this, not while I'm here, not ever." She'd stood between his mother and a monster, knowing it would cost her everything, and Giovanni had made her pay the price. Not any more, he whispered to the empty room. Never again. The hunt was on. The Umberto estate had never looked more beautiful, and Giovanni had never felt more like he was preparing for war. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ballroom's vaulted ceiling, each one worth more than most people earned in a year. White roses, Isabel's favorite, cascaded from towering arrangements that transformed the space into something between a fairy tale and a mausoleum. 500 guests in designer gowns and custom suits mingled beneath the soft glow of candlelight. Champagne flowing like water. The string quartet playing something elegant and forgettable. It was exactly the kind of party Isabel had dreamed of. The social event of the season. The moment she would be officially crowned as the future Mrs. Giovanni Umberto. Photographers from every major publication clustered near the entrance. The mayor was here. 2 senators. Business moguls and old money families whose names appeared in history books. Everyone who was anyone had come to witness the union of the Umberto and Francesco dynasties. They were about to witness something else entirely. Giovanni stood near the edge of the ballroom, a glass of scotch in his hand that he hadn't touched, watching Isabel hold court. She was radiant in white silk that probably cost more than Silvia Robinson earned in 6 months. A thought that made his jaw clench. The dress was designer, custom made, cut to perfection. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, the engagement ring he'd given her catching the light with every calculated gesture. She looked like a princess. She moved like a queen. She smiled like someone who'd already won. She has no idea, Marco murmured, appearing at Giovanni's elbow. The big man was dressed in a tuxedo that almost made him look civilized, but Giovanni knew he was armed, knew his security team was positioned throughout the room, knew every exit was covered. Good, Giovanni said quietly. Let her enjoy it. We found her, by the way, Silvia Robinson. Giovanni's attention snapped to Marco, his pulse quickening. Where? Working double shifts at a diner on the south side, place called Rosie's, open 24 hours. She's been there since 6 a.m. this morning. Marco paused. She looks rough, boss, exhausted, like she hasn't slept since I threw her out of her home and her job based on a lie, Giovanni finished, the words tasting like ash. Is she safe? I have 2 men watching the place. Discreet. She doesn't know they're there. Keep it that way. After tonight, I'll go to her myself. Giovanni's eyes returned to Isabel, who was laughing at something the mayor's wife said, her hand possessively on the arm of Francesco's patriarch. Her father, a man whose desperation Giovanni could now see written in every forced smile. This has to be public. She has to understand what it means to be destroyed in front of everyone. Marco shifted his weight. Boss, you sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back. The Francesco family tried to buy their way out of bankruptcy by marrying their daughter into my house, Giovanni interrupted, his voice cold. They put my mother's life at risk. They destroyed an innocent woman's reputation. They thought I was too blind or too stupid to see it. He drained his scotch in one swallow. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what they are. Your father would have just made them disappear. I'm not my father. Giovanni set the glass down with enough force to make it ring. My father was a man who let loyal soldiers die for him and sent their daughters flowers. He was a man who cared more about power than people. I'm done being that kind of man. Marco was quiet for a moment, then nodded. The AV team has everything loaded. You just give me the signal. 10 more minutes, Giovanni said, checking his watch. Let her give her speech first. Let her thank everyone for coming. Let her feel like she's won. You're a cold son of a bitch when you want to be. I learned from the best. Isabel took the stage at exactly 9 p.m., right on schedule. The string quartet faded out, and a spotlight found her at the podium, illuminating her like an angel. The room fell silent, 500 faces turning toward her with varying degrees of interest, envy, and calculation. "Good evening, everyone," Isabel began, her voice smooth and practiced. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate this incredible milestone. When Giovanni and I first met, I never imagined—" Giovanni stopped listening. He'd heard this speech during rehearsal 3 times, knew every pause, every calculated emotion, every lie. His eyes moved instead to the balcony where his mother sat in her wheelchair, Marco's most trusted guard standing behind her. Maria was wearing the blue dress Silvia had always said brought out her eyes, her silver hair styled the way Silvia used to do it. She looked small and fragile in the vast ballroom, but her eyes were sharp, focused, almost hungry. She knew what was coming. Giovanni had told her everything 3 days ago, had played her the recordings, had watched her cry, and then watched something harder than tears take over. His mother wanted justice. She wanted the woman who'd tortured her to pay. Giovanni intended to deliver. "And I look forward to being part of this family," Isabel was saying, her hand pressed to her heart in a gesture of false humility, "to honoring the Umberto legacy and everything Giovanni's parents built, to making Maria proud." The mention of his mother's name, spoken with such casual, poisonous sweetness, made Giovanni's blood boil. "And now," Isabel continued, turning to smile at Giovanni, "I'd like to invite my fiancée to say a few words." Applause rippled through the room. Giovanni made his way to the stage, aware of every eye on him. Every camera pointed in his direction. He took the microphone from Isabel, letting his hand brush hers, letting her think everything was perfect. "Thank you, Isabel," he said, his voice carrying through the ballroom. "That was beautiful. Though I have to admit, I'm not great with words. So I thought instead, I'd show everyone what this union really means. We've prepared a tribute video, a behind-the-scenes look at our relationship, at the love and trust that brought us here tonight." Isabel's smile widened. She thought this was part of the plan, thought she was about to see a montage of their carefully curated relationship. Photographs from charity galas, candid moments that were anything but candid, the performance of a perfect couple. She had no idea. "Marco," Giovanni said quietly into the microphone, "roll the video." The lights dimmed. The massive screens on either side of the stage flickered to life. For the first 30 seconds, it was exactly what Isabel expected. Photographs of her and Giovanni at various events, smiling for cameras, the picture of elegance and power. Soft music played. Some guests smiled. Isabel glowed. Then the photographs stopped. The screen went black for just a moment, and then Isabel's voice filled the ballroom, crystal clear, amplified for 500 people to hear. "You're pathetic, you know that. Sitting there in your chair, drooling like an infant. Giovanni's mother, the great Maria Umberto, reduced to this." The room went silent, absolutely silent. 500 people frozen in collective shock. The screen stayed black, but the audio continued. Isabel's cruelty laid bare. "He doesn't even see you anymore. You're just furniture to him. A burden. It would be kinder if you just died in your sleep. Maybe I should help with that. Extra pill or two. Who would know? Who would even care?" Isabel's face had gone white. "Giovanni, stop this. Stop this right now." But Giovanni wasn't listening. He was watching the crowd, watching the horror dawn on face after face, watching Isabel's carefully constructed image crumble in real time, the sound of wine being poured, deliberately spilled, Maria's frightened whimper, and Isabel's voice again, dripping with sadistic pleasure. "Oh, did I spill wine on you? How clumsy. Maybe you should lick it up. Show me you can still do something useful." Someone in the crowd gasped. Several women had their hands over their mouths. The mayor looked like he'd been struck. Even the hardened businessmen, men who'd ordered violence, who'd destroyed competitors without mercy, looked disgusted. Then Silvia's voice cut through, brave and clear. "Get away from her. Right now." The sound of the confrontation played out for everyone to hear. Isabel's threats, Silvia's defense of Maria, and finally, damning in its cold authority, Giovanni's own voice firing the only person who'd protected his mother. When the audio finally ended, the silence was deafening. Giovanni turned to Isabel. She was shaking, her perfect composure shattered, mascara already starting to run as tears of rage and humiliation streamed down her face. "You bastard," she hissed. "You goddamn bastard." "That's the woman you all came to celebrate tonight," Giovanni said to the crowd, his voice cutting through the ballroom like a blade. "Isabel Francesco, a woman who tortured my elderly, disabled mother, who threatened to murder her in her sleep, who framed an innocent woman for theft and assault to cover her crimes." He reached for Isabel's hand. She tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. "The engagement is over," Giovanni said, and with one swift motion he stripped the ring from her finger. "The alliance is dead. The Francesco family will leave this house tonight and never return." "You can't do this," Isabel spat, her voice shrill now, all pretense gone. "My father, our families, you need us. I need nothing from you." Giovanni's voice was ice. "Your family is bankrupt. You were selling yourself to save them, and you thought I was too stupid to see it." He turned to Marco, who'd appeared at the edge of the stage with 3 security guards. "Escort Miss Francesco off the property. If she or anyone from her family sets foot on Umberto land again, they won't leave alive." "You're insane!" Isabel screamed as Marco's men took her arms. "You're making a mistake. I'll destroy you. But her threats dissolved into incoherent rage as she was dragged from the stage, her white silk dress trailing behind her like a surrender flag. The crowd parted like water, no one willing to touch her, to be associated with her, to offer even a word of support. Giovanni waited until she was gone before speaking again. "There's one more thing you all need to know," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "The woman you heard on that recording defending my mother, Silvia Robinson, was fired based on false accusations. Her reputation was destroyed. Her livelihood was taken. All because she had the courage to stand up to a monster." He looked around the room, meeting eyes, letting his anger show. "If anyone in this room harms her, speaks ill of her, or stands in the way of me making this right, you'll answer to me personally. And I promise you, I am my father's son in the ways that matter." His smile was cold enough to freeze blood. "I protect what's mine, and Silvia Robinson is under my protection." The message was clear. Touch her and die. "This party is over," Giovanni said. "Get out of my house." For a moment no one moved. Then the mayor's wife stood, nodding respectfully to Giovanni, and made her way to the exit. Others followed, some quickly, some reluctantly, but within 10 minutes the ballroom was emptying like water down a drain. Giovanni stood alone on the stage, watching them go, feeling the weight of what he'd just done settle on his shoulders. He'd burned the Francesco alliance to the ground, He'd humiliated one of the city's oldest families in front of everyone who mattered. He'd made enemies tonight that would take years to neutralize, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. Marco appeared at his side. "That was something, boss. Where's my mother?" "Already taken back to her room. She's okay, tired, but okay." Marco paused. She smiled, though. First time I've seen her really smile since the stroke. Giovanni closed his eyes. "Good. What now?" Giovanni opened his eyes, his jaw set with determination. "Now I go find Silvia Robinson, and I get on my knees and beg her to come home." "Think she'll forgive you?" Giovanni thought of Silvia walking away in the rain. Thought of her quiet dignity even as her world collapsed. Thought of her voice on that recording. "You will not treat her like this. Not while I'm here." "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it." He left the empty ballroom behind, the shattered crystal of his mother's engagement party crunching under his feet, and headed out into the night to find the woman who'd shown him what loyalty really meant. Rosie's Diner sat on the corner of Fletcher and South Broad, the kind of place that stayed open 24 hours, not because it was thriving, but because the owner couldn't afford to close. The neon sign flickered, Arzy's Dinar, and through the grease-smeared windows, Giovanni could see the worn vinyl booths and cracked linoleum floors that spoke of decades of hard use and deferred maintenance. It was 11:47 p.m. He'd left the gala at 9:30, driven across the city in his Mercedes, a car worth more than most of these buildings, and now sat in the darkness of the parking lot, watching her. Silvia moved through the diner with the kind of exhausted efficiency that came from too many hours on her feet. Even from here, Giovanni could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way she rubbed her lower back when she thought no one was looking. The forced brightness of her smile as she refilled coffee for the handful of late-night customers. She was wearing a pink polyester uniform that had probably been washed 1,000 times, an apron stained with coffee, and what looked like ketchup, non-slip shoes that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, no jewelry except Giovanni's breath caught. The brooch, his mother's brooch, pinned to her uniform right over her heart. She'd kept it, even after everything, even after being thrown out and accused and destroyed. She'd kept the one thing Maria had given her. Not to sell, not to pawn, but to wear, to remember. Marco had been right. She looked exhausted. She looked like someone who'd been working herself to death trying to survive. And it was Giovanni's fault. He waited. Watched her finish her shift. Watched her count out her tips. Probably less than what Isabel spent on a single latte. Watched her say goodbye to the cook, a heavy-set man who patted her shoulder with what looked like genuine affection. Then she pushed through the door into the night, and the rain started. Of course it did. The bus stop was a covered bench with half the plexiglass missing, graffiti covering what remained. Silvia stood beneath it, shrugging into a jacket that was too thin for the weather, her bag clutched to her chest. The rain came down in sheets, bouncing off the pavement, turning the street into a river of reflected neon and darkness. Giovanni got out of his car. The rain hit him immediately, soaking through his tuxedo, custom made, probably worth $5,000, now ruined. He didn't care. He crossed the empty street, his dress shoes splashing through puddles, his hair plastered to his forehead. Silvia saw him coming and went absolutely still. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the oil-slicked pavement. The Mafia boss in his ruined tuxedo, and the waitress in her second-hand jacket, rain hammering down around them like the universe itself was trying to wash away the past week. "Mr. Umberto," Silvia's voice was careful, controlled, but Giovanni heard the tremor beneath it. Not fear, worse, exhaustion, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from being beaten down by life and not having the energy to fight anymore. Silvia. His voice came out rougher than he intended. I need to talk to you. I don't think we have anything to talk about. She took a step back, her hand tightening on her bag. I'm not going to press charges or cause trouble. I just want to be left alone. I'm not here to threaten you. Then why are you here? Her eyes flashed, some of that fire he'd heard on the recordings breaking through the exhaustion. To tell me the charges were dropped? To offer me severance pay? What, Giovanni? What could you possibly want from me now? The use of his first name. Not Sir, not Mr. Umberto, just Giovanni. Felt like a gift he didn't deserve. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Silvia laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're sorry. You're sorry. You fired me based on lies. You threw me out of your house like garbage. You left your mother alone with a woman who was torturing her. And you're sorry? Yes. Giovanni took a step closer. The rain was pouring down both of them now, but neither moved. I'm sorry. Those words aren't enough, I know. Nothing I say will be enough. But I need you to hear them anyway. Why? Silvia's voice cracked. Why now? What changed? I heard the recordings. Silvia's eyes widened. What recordings? The brooch you're wearing. It was my father's. A security device with a recorder. It captured everything. Isabel's abuse, your defense of my mother, my own. He couldn't finish. The memory of his voice on that recording, cold and dismissive and cruel, was a wound that would never fully heal. You heard everything, Silvia said quietly. Everything. And I played it tonight, at the engagement gala. 500 people heard what Isabel did, what I did. Giovanni's hands clenched at his sides. The engagement is over. Isabel's family has been banned from my home. I made sure everyone knows you were innocent, that you were the only one who protected my mother when I was too blind to see the truth. Silvia was quiet for a long moment, rain streaming down her face, her eyes searching his. Good. That's good. Your mother deserves better. So do you. I don't need your pity, Mr. Umberto. It's not pity. Giovanni took another step forward, close enough now that he could see the way her hands shook, see the tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. Silvia, my father was a hard man, cruel sometimes. He used people, discarded them when they were no longer useful. A man named Marcus Robinson once saved my father's life, took 3 bullets meant for him. And my father sent flowers to the funeral. Silvia's breath caught. I didn't know Marcus Robinson had daughters, Giovanni continued, his voice rough with shame. I didn't know he left behind 2 girls who had to fight and scrape and survive on their own. I didn't know that one of those girls would grow up to be the kind of person who would risk everything to protect a stranger. I didn't know, and that's my fault. But I know now. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want to be my father. Giovanni's voice broke. I don't want to be the kind of man who throws away loyalty, who values power over people, who lets good people suffer while monsters wear designer dresses and smile for cameras. The rain poured down. A bus rumbled past, its brakes squealing, but neither of them moved. I can't undo what I did to you, Giovanni said. I can't give you back the week you spent terrified and exhausted. I can't erase the fact that I chose a lie over the truth. But I can ask you, I can beg you, to give me a chance to make it right. How? Silvia's voice was barely a whisper. How do you make this right? Giovanni did something he'd never done before, something his father would have rather died than do. He got on his knees, right there on the oil-slicked pavement of the south side in the pouring rain. The head of the Umberto family knelt before a waitress in a second-hand jacket. The water soaked through his pants. Grit bit into his knees. He didn't care. "Come back," he said, looking up at her. "Not as a maid, not as staff. Come back as family, as someone my mother loves, as someone who belongs in that house more than I do." Silvia's hands flew to her mouth. "Giovanni, get up. You can't. People will see. I don't care who sees." His voice was fierce now, urgent. "You protected my mother when I wouldn't. You saw her humanity when I saw only my own ambition. You were brave when I was a coward. You're worth 10 of me, Silvia Robinson, and I'm on my knees begging you to come home." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why do you care so much?" "Because my mother hasn't smiled since her stroke. Not once. Not until tonight, when she watched Isabel be destroyed. And you know what she did after? She asked for you. She made Marco understand through gestures and half-words that she wanted you, not me, not nurses or doctors or expensive care. You." Silvia was crying openly now, her shoulders shaking. "She needs you," Giovanni continued. "And He swallowed hard. "I need to do this right. I need to honor the debt my family owes yours. I need to be better than the man who wore this name before me." "I can't just come back as a maid," Silvia said, her voice trembling. "I can't go back to being invisible, to being someone you fire the next time it's convenient." "Then don't." Giovanni reached into his jacket, soaked through, ruined, and pulled out an envelope, waterproof, sealed. "This is a contract, not employment, partnership. You'll have full authority over my mother's care. You'll have a room in the family wing, not the staff quarters. You'll eat at our table, not in the kitchen. You'll be consulted on family decisions that affect her, and you'll have a salary that reflects what you're actually worth." Silvia took the envelope with shaking hands, but didn't open it. "If you want lawyers to review it, I'll pay for them," Giovanni said. "If you want changes, I'll make them. If you want to take time to think about it, I'll wait. But please, Silvia, please come back. My mother is breaking without you. And He stopped, the words catching in his throat, because there was something else, something he'd been trying not to acknowledge. The way his heart had hammered when he'd listened to her voice on those recordings. The way he'd torn the city apart looking for her. The way seeing her now, exhausted and hurting but still standing, still fighting, made something in his chest ache. "And," Silvia prompted, her voice soft, "and I want to know you," Giovanni admitted. "Not as an employee, not as someone I give orders to. I want to know the woman who was brave enough to stand between a monster and an old lady, who wore my mother's brooch even after I destroyed her life, who is strong enough to survive what I did to her and still standing here listening to me grovel." Silvia stared down at him for a long moment, rain streaming between them. Then slowly she extended her hand. "Get up," she said. "You look ridiculous." Giovanni took her hand and stood, but he didn't let go. Her palm was calloused from work, smaller than his, cold from the rain. It felt like the most precious thing he'd ever held. "I'll come back," Silvia said quietly, "but on my terms. I'm not staff. I'm not property. I'm not something you can fire when it's convenient or protect when it suits you. If I come back, I'm family, real family. That means you listen to me. That means you trust me. That means when I tell you something is wrong, you believe me. Yes." The word came out fierce, immediate. "Anything, everything, whatever you need." "And I want a car that actually starts in the rain," Silvia added. And there, finally, was a ghost of a smile. "Because that bus ride is brutal." Giovanni laughed, and it felt like something breaking open in his chest. "Done. Pick any car in the garage. They're yours." "I'm serious about the family thing," Silvia said, her eyes searching his. "Your mother is the most important thing. Not business, not alliances, not power. Her." "I know." Giovanni squeezed her hand. "That's why I need you. Because you've always known that, and I forgot." They stood there in the rain, hands clasped, the city flowing around them. Two people from different worlds, bound together by an old woman's love and a second chance that neither of them had expected. "I want to see her," Silvia said finally. "Tonight. Before I change my mind. My car's across the street." Giovanni led her to the Mercedes, opened the passenger door like she was royalty. Silvia slid in, looking around at the leather seats and the dashboard that probably cost more than her yearly rent, and shook her head. "This is insane," she muttered. "This whole thing is insane." "Welcome to the family," Giovanni said, and meant it. As they drove through the rain-soaked streets toward the estate, Silvia kept touching the brooch on her chest, and Giovanni kept stealing glances at her, and something that felt dangerously like hope started to bloom in the spaces between them. Maybe it was possible to fix what he'd broken. Maybe it was possible to be better than his father. Maybe, just maybe, the woman sitting beside him with rain still dripping from her hair and fire in her eyes was the answer to questions Giovanni hadn't even known he was asking. The mansion appeared on the hill, lights blazing, and for the first time in years Giovanni felt like he was actually coming home. Maria's face when she saw Silvia was something Giovanni would remember for the rest of his life. His mother had been sitting in her wheelchair in the drawing room, Marco standing guard nearby, when they walked in. Silvia was still in her diner uniform, still damp from the rain, but she moved across that expensive carpet like she belonged there, like she'd always belonged there. "Mrs. Umberto," Silvia said softly, kneeling beside the wheelchair. Maria's hands flew to Silvia's face, trembling fingers tracing her cheeks, her hair, as if confirming she was real. Then the tears came, quiet, relieved tears, and she pulled Silvia into an embrace that spoke everything her damaged words couldn't say. Giovanni turned away, giving them privacy, but he heard his mother's broken voice. "Si, Silvia. My Silvia." "I'm here," Silvia whispered back. "I'm not leaving again. I promise." They spent the next 2 hours in Maria's room. Silvia helped her into comfortable clothes, brushed her hair the way she liked it, made her chamomile tea that actually steeped for the right amount of time. Giovanni watched from the doorway, seeing his mother transform from the haunted, frightened woman she'd been under Isabel's care into something closer to herself. Still fragile, still struggling, but present in a way she hadn't been in weeks. It was close to 2 a.m. when Silvia finally convinced Maria to sleep. Giovanni walked Silvia to her new room, one of the guest suites in the family wing, freshly prepared, nothing like the cramped quarters she'd had before. It had a king-size bed, a sitting area, windows that overlooked the rose gardens, and a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. "This is too much," Silvia said, standing in the doorway. "It's what you deserve." Giovanni paused. "Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning about—" The lights went out. All of them. The entire mansion plunged into darkness so complete that Giovanni couldn't see his hand in front of his face. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but silence, and the sound of his own breathing. Then the emergency generator kicked in, bathing everything in dim red emergency lighting. and somewhere below, glass shattered. Giovanni's instincts, honed by years of living in a world where violence was currency, went cold and sharp. He grabbed Silvia's arm. "Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Marco." "What's happening?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." He was moving before she could argue. His hand going to the gun he kept in a holster at the small of his back. His phone was already out, speed-dialing Marco. But the call wouldn't connect. Someone had jammed the signals. This wasn't random. This was planned. Giovanni made it to the hallway when he heard Marco's voice, urgent and controlled. "Boss, we've got multiple hostiles entering through the east wing. At least 5, maybe more, armed, professional." "Francesco," Giovanni said, the word tasting like poison. He should have known. Should have anticipated that Isabel wouldn't just accept her humiliation. Desperate people with nothing to lose were the most dangerous kind. "I've got men moving to intercept, but they cut the main power and the backup cameras. We're running blind." "My mother. Her room is closest to the east wing." Marco's voice was grim. "Boss, they're heading straight for her." Giovanni's blood turned to ice. This wasn't about him. This was about eliminating the witness, silencing the woman whose voice on those recordings had destroyed the Francesco family. If Maria died tonight, they could claim Giovanni had faked the evidence, that it was all a setup. They could salvage something from the wreckage. He ran. The family wing was a maze of hallways and rooms, but Giovanni had grown up here, knew every corner. He reached his mother's room just as he heard footsteps, heavy, purposeful, moving fast. 2 men, both armed with handguns, both wearing dark tactical gear. Giovanni didn't hesitate. He fired twice. Center mass on the first, headshot on the second when he tried to return fire. Both men dropped, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the halls like thunder. He burst through his mother's door. The room was empty. The wheelchair was gone. And the hidden door behind the bookshelf, the one that led to the old servant passages his grandfather had built during Prohibition, stood open. Silvia. She'd heard the commotion, and done exactly what Giovanni should have known she would do. Protected his mother, gotten her out, used her knowledge of the house to disappear into places the Francesco men wouldn't know existed. Giovanni's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, bouncing through some encrypted relay. Wine cellar. Smart girl. The wine cellar was a converted panic room, steel reinforced, designed to withstand anything short of explosives. If Silvia got Maria there, they'd be safe. If. Silvia's arms burned from pushing Maria's wheelchair through the narrow servant passages. The passages were dusty, cramped, lit only by the dim emergency lighting that barely penetrated through cracks in the walls. Maria was terrified. Silvia could feel her shaking, but she hadn't made a sound. "Almost there," Silvia whispered. "Just a little further, Mrs. Umberto." The passages were a labyrinth, but Silvia had explored them during her first week at the mansion, curious about the history, about the way the house was built in layers. She knew these tunnels led to the old wine cellar, knew the cellar had a steel door that could be locked from inside. She just had to get there before... Footsteps. Behind them. Fast. Heavy. Male. "I know you're down here," a voice echoed through the passage. "Come out and we'll make it quick. Fight, and you'll watch the old lady suffer first." Silvia's jaw clenched. She pushed Maria faster. The wheelchair's wheels squeaking against the stone floor. There, the industrial pantry, the old servant's entrance to the kitchen, massive and filled with commercial shelving units that hadn't been used in decades. An idea crystallized, desperate and dangerous. "Mrs. Umberto," Silvia whispered, bringing the wheelchair to a stop just inside the pantry. "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Maria nodded, her hand gripping Silvia's with surprising strength. Silvia positioned the wheelchair behind a row of shelving, then grabbed a heavy industrial mixing bowl from one of the lower shelves. She moved to the doorway, pressed herself against the wall, and waited. The footsteps grew closer. 2 sets. The men were talking in low voices, coordinating, professional. "She can't have gone far," one said. "Old lady in a wheelchair, some maid." "This should be easy." Silvia's grip tightened on the bowl. "Some maid." The first man came through the doorway, his gun leading. Silvia swung the bowl with everything she had, connecting with his wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. She followed with her elbow to his face, a move her father had taught her when she was 16, back when the neighborhood was worse and walking home alone was dangerous. And the man went down hard. The second man raised his weapon, but Silvia was already moving. She grabbed the industrial shelving unit, 6 feet tall, loaded with ancient cooking equipment, and pulled. The entire thing came crashing down, hundreds of pounds of metal and cast iron and forgotten kitchen tools. The second man went down under the avalanche, screaming. Silvia grabbed the first man's gun, hands shaking, adrenaline screaming through her system, and pointed it at both of them. "Don't move. Don't even breathe wrong." "You crazy bitch," the second man groaned from under the shelving. "You broke my leg." "Good. Maybe you'll think twice before breaking into people's homes to murder old ladies." She heard Maria make a sound. Not fear this time, but something close to satisfaction. Silvia glanced back and saw the older woman's face, fierce and proud in the emergency lighting. "Let's get you to that wine cellar," Silvia said. Giovanni found them 20 minutes later, surrounded by his security team. The 2 men Silvia had taken down were being dragged away, both alive but thoroughly incapacitated. 3 other Francesco soldiers had been captured in other parts of the house. And Isabel was kneeling in the grand foyer, hands zip-tied behind her back, mascara streaking down her face as Marco held her in place. She'd been caught trying to flee when it became clear her plan was falling apart. "You ruined everything," Isabel spat when she saw Giovanni descending the stairs. "Everything. My family, my future, my life, all because of some maid and a useless old woman." Giovanni crossed to her slowly, deliberately. Then he crouched down, looking her in the eyes. "That maid just saved my mother's life and took down 2 armed men with a mixing bowl and a shelf. That useless old woman is worth more than your entire bloodline." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "And you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell knowing you lost to them." He stood nodding to Marco. "Call the prosecutor. I want her charged with attempted murder, home invasion, conspiracy, everything. And make sure the media knows the Francesco family sent assassins to murder a disabled stroke victim." "No!" Isabel screamed. "You can't. My father will—" "Your father is bankrupt and disgraced. He has nothing. You have nothing. And you'll die with nothing." Giovanni turned away. "Get her out of my sight." He found Silvia in the wine cellar, sitting on the floor beside Maria's wheelchair, still holding the gun, still shaking with adrenaline. She looked up when he entered, and the relief in her eyes nearly broke him. "It's over," Giovanni said gently. "You're safe. She's safe." Silvia nodded, then started to cry. Great heaving sobs that she'd been holding back, all the fear and exhaustion and terror of the past week finally crashing down. Giovanni sat beside her, pulled her into his arms and let her fall apart. Maria reached down with her trembling hand and stroked Silvia's hair, making soft, soothing sounds, and Giovanni realized this was what family actually looked like. Not blood, not power, but three people who'd survived a war together and come out the other side. 3 months later, the rose garden was in full bloom, the morning sun catching on the dew-covered petals and turning them into diamonds. Maria sat in her wheelchair, though lately she'd been using it less, her physical therapy finally showing real progress, with a blanket across her lap and a genuine smile on her face. She was laughing, actually laughing at something destiny had said. Silvia's sister had moved into the mansion a month ago to start college at the nearby university, Giovanni having quietly paid her full tuition and expenses. The two of them had formed an unlikely friendship, the elderly matriarch and the sharp-tongued teenager. "Your sister is a menace," Giovanni said, coming up behind Silvia, where she stood on the balcony overlooking the garden. "She's 17. It's her job to be a menace." Silvia leaned back against him as his arms came around her waist. This, whatever this was between them, had grown slowly over the past 3 months. Quiet dinners after Maria went to sleep, conversations that lasted until dawn, stolen moments in hallways where neither of them could quite justify why they were standing so close. Last week, Giovanni had kissed her, right here on this balcony, with the sun setting and Maria watching from below with a knowing smile. It had felt like falling and flying all at once. "The board meeting went well," Giovanni said. They approved the Marcus Robinson Memorial Fund, full scholarships for children of first responders and service members. It'll be administered by the Umberto Foundation. Silvia turned in his arms, her eyes bright with tears. "Thank you. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's a start. It's perfect." She touched his face, and Giovanni leaned into her hand like a man starving for gentleness. He would have been proud, not of the money, but of what it means. That you remembered. That you cared. "I care about a lot of things these days," Giovanni said quietly. "Things I never thought mattered. Things that are worth more than all the power in the world." Below them, Maria called out, her speech improving every day, the words still slurred but understandable. "Giovanni, Silvia, te come, de destiny." "Funny. We're being summoned," Silvia laughed. "You go ahead. I need to make a call." He watched her descend the stairs, watched his mother's face light up when Silvia sat beside her, watched Destiny roll her eyes affectionately at something Silvia said. 3 women from different generations, different backgrounds, different worlds, bound together by love and loyalty and second chances. Giovanni pulled out his phone and called Marco. "The Francesco assets have been fully liquidated, boss," Marco reported. "The family's bankrupt. Isabel's trial starts next month. The prosecutor is confident on all counts." "Good. And the blood debt?" "Paid. The Robinson sisters are set for life. College funds, trust accounts, everything, just like you ordered." "And Silvia doesn't know?" "Not a clue, though she's going to figure it out eventually. Woman's too smart not to notice." Giovanni smiled. "I'll deal with that when it comes." "Anything else?" "Yeah. The wedding planner called. Wants to know if you've set a date yet." Giovanni's eyes drifted back to Silvia, who was now teaching Maria a hand game while Destiny filmed it on her phone, all 3 of them laughing like they'd known each other forever. "Not yet," Giovanni said softly, "but soon, very soon." He ended the call and headed down to join them, to join his family, the real kind, the kind that mattered, the kind built on trust and sacrifice and love instead of blood and obligation and fear. The lady of the Umberto house looked up as he approached, her eyes warm and bright, and Giovanni Umberto, a man who'd spent his whole life believing he had to be hard to survive, finally understood what his father never had. That true power wasn't in how much you could take. It was in what you were willing to give. And Giovanni was ready to give this woman everything.